of the liverboard, and yet they're a very solid community among themselves. They support each other and look after each other, and they're perhaps a lot closer than those of us who live in, say, gated communities here in Scottsdale, where by law we have to, for insurance purposes anyway, not by law, we have to live behind walls if we have swimming pools.
Right.
You know,
right,
so
for protection.
it's
for
liability.
for children, and yeah.
Exactly. So it's a whole different feeling than if you're like, tied up boat to boat.
Where you're living on the swimming pool, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you fall in, then presumably you have the skills to survive it. I love it.
Well, you're going to see your neighbors every day. You're going to see them on the dock. You're going to see them, heading out, and inevitably somebody's going to need help at some point. The engine will stall, or they'll get stuck out on the water, what have you.
And weather is, even though we're having this hideous spell here in Phoenix, this really been the most, hasn't it been just the most bizarre summer? It's either been 120, or we've had storms, or. But anyway, I would think that a liverboard community would be especially vulnerable to weather because you're already on the water.
It is. Now, the marina that we were in happened to be on Lake Washington, which is inland.
Okay.
You get to the external sound by going through the locks at Ballard. So we were somewhat sheltered, but definitely if you are anchored out, if you are on the ocean side of things, you're watching for weather all the time. Because if a blow comes up, even if you're well secured at anchor, it could blow you ashore at any time. So you watch out for yourself and you watch out for each other.
However, your character is not actually living aboard, is he? He's living...
Not currently.
No. He's, Patrick King of our staff, you are a big fan of Glen, Erik Hamilton's books. What would you like to say? You need the microphone. You're going to have to come up here and say it so they can hear you.
Give me a chance to take a bite, too.
Yes, and he can eat while you're doing that. You're not eating ice cream, so you're stuck.
I'm not. I like to watch people eat ice cream at the moment because I can't.
You've lost a lot of weight not eating ice cream, and I'm
Quite a
very
bit.
proud of you.
So, anyways, Eric or Glenn, sorry. What I really like about your book series is your pacing. You manage to keep that pacing at a pretty good intensity throughout it. So I'm really curious how you keep that pacing up and keep us all engaged, because your character really is very enigmatic, very different. So what draws you? What's your process in terms of writing a great thriller?
Well, thank you. It's always gratifying to hear that the pacing is right, because it is one of the things, especially with thrillers or with mystery thrillers, that you're always trying to work on. You're always trying to fine tune. I tend to write heavy on the first draft. I tend to overwrite a little bit, and then in subsequent drafts, I'm usually going through and excising what doesn't need to be there to try to move things along. I have a general rule of trying to keep chapters to a certain length, depending upon how much they need to be. Keeping the number of characters to a certain length within a chapter certainly helps. But mostly it's, am I revealing something important about the character or the action with at least every half page, right? Something important has to come out.
Wow.
I think more than anything else, that keeps people turning the page, if you've given them something interesting to think about.
Heart Cold Winter was one of my favorite books of last year, so I've got to say that you really did. You kept on moving it, and you kept on. I couldn't put it down. It was one of those I was up way too late reading.
It's one of the best compliments is when somebody comes in and says, "I got no sleep last night, and it's all your fault." So
Exactly. So I'll blame you for that one.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Pat.
And I might add, it does not hurt to have an enthusiastic bookseller
Absolutely.
in your corner. So maybe before we go any further, we should give Jeff Abbott a call, since he is going to join us by Skype, and he may be wondering if we've forgotten him. Oh, look, another Poison Pen staff member doing magical things. This is an interactive event today, isn't it? I love it. There we are. Okay. You can have some more ice cream quick. If you don't, you may be in trouble because I might eat
Very
it.
quick.
I'm telling you, that's delicious.
Really, yes.
I know. We had an ice cream social on Sunday. Lucky us. There he is. I see him. Now, do I still need to talk into this? All right. So, Jeff Abbott, how are you? I can't hear you.
1 second.
1 second.
There he is.
Wait, 1 second. We have to turn up the sound.
really hear us. So, sorry.
That's all right. Can you hear us, Jeff?
Process.
Yes, I can.
There
Hey,
you
there
are,
you are.
at last. Wow. Well, I'm going to start all over again. And when I say, how are you, I'm asking that with more oomph than I might usually pose that question to an author. You really had I mean, you've got the most dramatic excuse for not being here of any author ever in 28 years.
Well, I'm sorry that I'm not there, and I wish that I could be. But I appreciate everyone understanding why I can't be here.
You're missing out on the Bluebell Butter Pecan ice cream. Eat your heart out.
That's my favorite flavor.
It's so good. So, I've never actually known anybody involved in a lightning strike. Was it terrifying?
Yeah. It hit our house about 4 p.m. We were all in the house. We all got out very quickly. I mean, it sounded like a bomb had gone off. And the house was wreathed in smoke during a heavy downpour within minutes. So it struck the roof and exploded into the attic, and the fire burned very quickly.
It's incredibly hot. Rob and I were driving in the Arizona mountains a couple years ago, and it struck the roadside. Not us, but right, and we could feel the heat in the car. It was a tremendous jolt, so I can well imagine that it would incinerate your house.
Yeah, I mean, parts of the house are still standing. You know, a lot of the damage is from water and chemicals and smoke. But you know, we all got out. We had a plan on how to get out in case the house was ever on fire. We stuck with that as the boys got older, and we stuck to the plan. So everyone should have a plan. That's my fire safety tip for the evening.
Well, I'm really, really happy for your family that none of you were hurt, even though it was devastating. The only other thing I could think of that might be a positive is surely there's a book in this.
I will think about that at some point. I'm not sure how the story ends right now.
But you like to have explosive events in your books, so you've literally got one here that you can describe.
As someone pointed out to me, there's a fire in Blaine, and
That's true.
I was really planning on having other fires in other books, but you never know.
So talk to us about Blaine. It published last week, if I remember, right?
It did. It's probably getting the best reviews of my career, which is really nice, but makes it more sucky that I'm not finishing. But Blame is about a young woman who is the driver of a car when she's a senior in high school in a bad car crash, and her next door neighbor, boy next door, is killed in the crash, and she suffers with amnesia afterwards. And it pretty much undoes her life. 2 years later, she's living on the street, she's homeless. She just can't cope with life, and then someone starts posting to her abandoned Facebook page that they know what she claims she doesn't remember.
Wow.
And so she decides she's going to investigate what happened that night with the kind of person that she was 2 years ago, the person she doesn't remember. And I got the idea for the book, and don't worry, I'm not going to monologue here, but I'll just say this real quick. I got the idea for the book reading memoirs of people who had amnesia. And one of the things that kept recurring in it is that they were dependent on their loved ones and their people around them to tell them who they were and what kind of person they were and what they enjoyed doing and what they liked. And sometimes the people around them would not be reliable narrators. They would try to tell them stuff to kind of shape them into who they wanted them to be. And I thought, wow, that would be really interesting to have a book with a person who's a blank slate, and she's surrounded by a group of unreliable narrators who maybe have a good reason for not being honest with her, maybe to protect her or try to help her, or might have a really awful reason for not being honest with her. So
That's outstanding.
It's a terrific premise, and when I was reading it, I was reminded, believe it or not, Anne Perry has written forever a series about William Monk. a man who can't remember who he is, and as he's risen through the Victorian, because there was even less in the way of medical aid available for somebody with his problems, and he's always, had this awful sense that there were ticking bombs out there and unreliable witnesses and all. And eventually she kind of reconciled him with some of his past life, but go ahead.
I was going to say, Monk had concealed his amnesia in theories. He would be fired immediately from the Victorian Police Department if it was known. So I think one difference is that Jane's amnesia is used as a weapon against her because people are aware of it and know that she doesn't remember. So they use that to their advantage.
Well,
but I love William Monk character. He's a great character.
He is a great character, and she was not able to use social media in her mid-Victorian series, but I thought you deployed social media in the plot of Blame very well. I mean, it's a very contemporary kind of suspense story.
Well, thank you. That I talked with, because it's centered on a car crash, I talked with a lawyer who specializes in car crashes, and social media is one of the first things they start analyzing after a car crash. Because people who are like partying a lot are posting that they're partying a lot to social media, or that they're out drinking every night, they're posting to social media. I mean, it's kind of this public diary. We forget that the whole world can read and see it. So that was something I sort of wanted to use when I had found that out in the research.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And of course, while you're doing all that partying and posting, you don't think anything bad will happen, and then it will catch you. Yeah. Well, I thought it was an outstanding book, and I'm glad that you've had such recognition for it. I mean, you need some boost at the moment while you're going.
It's been a nice boost after the fire, it's been good for my soul to go and see booksellers and readers and other writers. That's all very positive stuff, and always in my life to get to spend time with people like that.
Well, you've had a lot of support. Susan, who does our Twitter account, has posted, I don't know, or reposted, is that the right word? Retweeted, sorry. I don't even know the lingo here. Has retweeted all kinds of support from your fellow authors. And, it's been a very community kind of round for you, I thought it was very heartwarming.
It is. It's been really, really sweet and deeply appreciated.
So when you find a location where you will be, we will send our books to you, and you will thoughtfully sign them and send them back, right?
We are moving into a permanent rental home on Monday.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, because you didn't know last time I talked to you where you'd be.
We are squatting in friends' houses while they're on vacation.
I've always thought that term squatter, which is so English, you think of people, breaking into London mansions and going ho-ho and drinking up all the wine cellar and the whole bit. But so Austin, Texas has squatter.
Yeah, well, the principal of my son's high school had stopped by to visit us and just to lend his support. He goes, "Now whose house is this?" I was like, "Shh, they don't know we're here."
That's too funny.
They do now.
Well,
just don't post it on social media. You'll be fine.
So, Glenn, is there a question you'd like to ask Jeff? Since in theory we're sharing this event with you.
Sure. So, Jeff, I'm a fan. I got to see your wonderful speech at the Edgars a couple of years ago when I think it might have been Blame you were on deadline for. You said you had like 3 days to deliver the book. You were in a rush. You're going to run right back up to the hotel room and start working on that. Was that in fact Blame you were working on?
That was in fact Blame. I was actually camped out in my Rivalon during VoucherCon in New Orleans working on Blame too, so but it paid off. But yeah, that was me feeling guilty that I needed to get the book turned in, and here I was hosting the editor.
being responsible and doing your other job along the way. So, do you think, Jeff, that having Blame, I think, is intended to be a standalone, but it sounds like you've been moving between different types of protagonists with fair frequency in your career. And I'm just kind of curious whether you see yourself continuing to do that, or whether you'll move back into more series work after this.
Well, I think in most of my standalones, I've tended to write about sort of ordinary people caught up in extraordinary circumstances. With the Sam Capper series, he's such a badass.
Yes.
He's sort of hyper competent about a lot of things. The less competent heroes are more autobiographical. I enjoy writing them. But the book I'm almost done with right now is another standalone. Not a sequel to Glen, but it is set in the same Austin suburb. Part of it is. So that's just, I do want to write another Sam Capra. I have an idea for 6 Sam Capra, and it's just finding the time to write it right now. So.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's rather comforting. Harlan is over there in New Jersey. You're down there in Austin, Texas. Both of you writing about ordinary people in extraordinary circumstances. It's nice to spread it across the country, so we can all feel like, maybe we all feel like we could stumble into a novel, although maybe that wouldn't be such a plus considering the terrible things that happen.
Oh, exactly, yes. I don't want to be a hero in one of my stories.
No, definitely not. Well, I really hope that you will get through this with your usual cheer and bravo, and you will come and see us next book.
I would love to come see y'all. I love the store and love your customers, and they're always so good to me. Y'all are always so wonderful, and I'm just so sorry not to be there, but I appreciate y'all's understanding. And Glen, I hope your book is a huge success and you have a great tour.
Great. Thank you so much,
Thank you, Jeff. Thanks for joining us. I didn't mention that Glen's first book was nominated for an Edgar, so you obviously, came right at it. That must have been a real nice boost for you.
It was fantastic. The first book got what I have to say was a shocking amount of attention, but wonderful too. It was nominated for the Edgar. It was nominated for a couple of others as well, like the Barry, and it won the Anthony and the McCavity and the Strand Critics Award. So my wife points out when I'm feeling particularly low about the writing. She goes, that's the fans, your fellow writers, and the critics. It's 1, 2, 3, and that's been tremendous. The reception of the next 2 books have been really good, and I want to kind of reiterate something that we were touching on with Jeff. Is the mystery community is so wonderfully supportive. It's great, and aside from awards and attention and things like that, it's just so great to get out to Left Coast or BoucherCon or Thriller Fest and see friends again who I probably see more often than I see the friends I have at home. 2 or 3 times a year.
That's because you're home in some little room, right?
Exactly.
Out, on the streets, right?
To do that.
Very true. So Donald Westlake wrote an awful lot of his marvelous books from a kind of bad guy or the wrong end of the gun, as we often say. And there were certainly, back in the beginning of the recognized genre, there were guys that Raffles the burglar.
Right. Right.
What made you decide to write? Is it part of that liveaboard thing, or you just couldn't bring yourself to write a really moral kind of hero?
There's some of that. Van is a moral hero. He just was raised a little different. And I was always the kid who walked into the bank and looked for the cameras. I mean, that was just in me as a kid. And you see the big metal box with all the money in it, and you wonder, how do you get in there? Maybe. And even though, and I think it comes from growing up reading mysteries, but it also comes from reading books like The Saint and even Robin Hood, going way back when, and a lot of the Roald Dahl characters are on the shady side.
It's really true. I forgot about The Saint. My mother was an enormous fan of The Saint, Leslie Charteris, and those kind of gone out of fashion. It's been a long time since those were written, but like everything else, they'll swing back around.
Right, and today, of course, we've got Bernie Rodenbar and other modern versions. So.
Well, that's very true. So it really was his grandfather, and his grandfather was like a career criminal who brought him up to have this approach towards life.
Right.
And also, he has a lot of acquaintances in the life, so to speak. So, how is it you structure it so that he can, be a moral hero in a universe like that?
Well, it's sort of the means versus the end, where Van, grew up thinking stealing's okay, stealing's what I'm allowed to do. He grew out of that in a lot of ways. But he acquired a lot of skills, both there and in the Army Rangers, which is what he escaped into, which was day and night, or night and day, as far as his moral compass was concerned. He went from a very, very criminal outlook to a very highly honorable outlook and very regimented outlook. Not to make a pun out of it, but it's the case now where he's becoming comfortable with the grays, and he's comfortable using those skills for what he feels is right. Society may not feel it's right, but he feels it's right.
It's interesting. I've read a number of books recently that have somebody who is unorthodox and goes into the military, and is male and female. Kathy Reichs, her new book,
Yes.
Two Nights. Meg Gardner on sub. Peter, Spencer Quinn. I always call him by his real name, but Spencer Quinn and The Right Side.
Okay.
And even Reacher, who,
Right.
once a Marine, always a Marine, that kind of thing. And it's useful if you're going to write a paladin, a hero who's going to kind of take care of people, needs to have some skill set, and he's not going to learn it. I mean,
just off the street.
Yeah,
right?
well, you could, I suppose. Joe Ide and IQ, he's got a guy that has learned to be tough on the streets of Los Angeles. I can't remember if he has a military background. I don't think so.
I don't think so. Yeah.
No. But, I mean, what could be more useful than to send somebody, into the service and have, in fact, Jeff Parker's new book that he's going to sign at the end of August called The Room of White Fire, again, has a veteran who's come back and has turned private eye with a specialty of finding people. So he has a whole skill set, that he has learned fighting abroad and brings it back home. Rollins has got his guy with the military dog, So it's not unusual.
Robert Crace's Suspect too.
Right.
With the,
Yeah.
I think it's a natural progression where you want your hero to have those skills. We are at war now, and we have been at war for quite some time. So any hero who's serving in the military now is going to go overseas and be part of that in all likelihood, right? So there's that background and that environment as well. And so it is useful fictionally. It's a challenge from a research standpoint because you need to get it right along the way. And I would bet that, like me, all of those authors probably have contacts in the modern military that they rely upon to help them get it just so, but also to share some bits of inside trivia to make the writing that much more interesting.
I'm sure you're right. I mean, in the same way that Stephen Hunter has contacts in the gun community,
Right.
and himself shoots. You can't. They're pretty unforgiving if you screw up, the weapons or the skills. So what actually is the setup for Every Day Above Ground? I want to say that this is one of the most exciting covers. I really love the way this typography, is ablaze.
I adored it. This, as I think I mentioned to you beforehand, all of the covers that the publishers have put out, I've really liked. This is one that took very little tweaking from the first design they showed along the way. Not that the others have taken a lot, but this one, they kind of knew the spirit of the book. They knew the past successes that we'd had. And what I like about it in particular is not only is it evocative of the story, but a lot of the story deals with gold, as it happens, long forgotten gold. And this imbues that into the cover so well that I really like it a lot. The setup for the story is Van is recovering from the results of the last book.
Right.
He's rebuilding literally and figuratively his life. And he gets what sounds like a great offer, which is this gold that has been abandoned for 20 years The person who had hidden it away has died in prison, right? They believe it's there. It appears to be in a building that's completely abandoned. So they go to, he does his due diligence, he checks it out. Nobody seems to be around. It seems to be completely deserted. The building itself is gutted and scheduled for demolition. Why not go check it out? It turns out, as things often do in thrillers, it does not go to plan. And he ends up putting his foot into a very dangerous trap. And as a result, getting other people close to him in serious, serious trouble as well.
So one of the dilemmas, if you have a hero like this, is that he has to figure out a way to like corral the bad guys, but not himself go to jail. I mean, it's always the Bernie Rodenbach thing. He's always, in the midst of committing burglary when he stumbles across the body or whatever it is. So it's exceptionally difficult, for him to. He can't just call the cops. So what does he do?
Right.
And so your guy has a kind of similar, situation in which, and that makes him really fall back on his own skills and resources, doesn't it?
Right.
To try to affect some kind
He can't call 911 in most of these situations, not unless he's willing to spend a lot of time staring at concrete cinder block. Yeah.
So where does he, because this is always important, that you have to have some sort of income or otherwise the guy's going to be on the street and none of this is ever going to come true. Where does he get his income?
Well, at the start of this book, that's part of the challenge he has, is he's trying to rebuild a destroyed home. Both in the second book and in this one, he's having trouble making ends meet. He's a veteran. He's not really lived for tomorrow, so he doesn't have really much in the way of credit history or savings along the way. And he's scraping by. He's got a couple of odd jobs in this one. He's working at a bar. He's working as a bouncer. He's scraping out, and part of the lure too for him is he has these skills that could earn him a lot of money if he were willing to use them to those ends. And he's really not. That's not the person he is anymore.
So
but it is tempting.
Does he not have a military pension for some sort of subsistence? I mean, I always thought Reacher, because, we always think him drifting along with his toothbrush on the bus and buying a new set of clothes at, Costco or Walmart or whatever it is. But he does get to bank. I mean, he was a major, right, in the
Right.
military.
Yeah,
so he
Reacher's
must
an
have
officer.
a decent, kind of pension that I think is banked and he draws on it.
Well, he may. They've just changed the military pension services, but when Van served, and he would have gotten out, roughly a year ago in our time, it was 20 years. You needed to put in 20 years to get a pension.
I'm pretty sure I remember in some Reacher where he was, getting money from wherever bank account or something it was. But I mean, that, it's one reason there used to be a big thing about clerical detectives, because if you had somebody who was out poking around and didn't have to close their bookstore to, go off and detect, you had priests and you had rabbis and, you had Father Brown and you had Rabbi Small and all, and they were salaried, and so
These flexible schedules.
Well, yeah, so if they got sucked into something and they decided to investigate it, they didn't have to have a payback for it, other than a moral or whatever satisfaction. But your guy, I thought it was really believable that he wanted to go after the gold. In part because he really needed the money.
He really needed the money, and it seems like nobody owns it. It was ill-gotten gains. It could do some good for him and for his partner, who has his reasons that I won't reveal. It seems like the penny on the sidewalk, right? It doesn't belong to anybody at this point.
But we know better because this is a thriller.
This is a thriller, right? As the reader, we always know.
We do. Okay. Well, it's a lot of fun to watch him scramble along. So assuming he survives this book, and I'm not giving that away, what are you writing? Well, we will give it away if I ask you what you're writing next. But it'd be sort of stupid to assume that you're not at work on a new book.
I am. I'm working on a standalone, actually.
Aha!
Next.
So there you are.
Give it away.
Yeah. No, I'm working on a standalone next. I do have an idea in mind for the fourth Van Shaw book, so Van will return. But right now I'm working on a standalone. I'm very interested, not to reveal too much about the plot, but I'm very interested in the idea of modern fame curdling into infamy very quickly in today's social media and TMZ news cycles and what have when a good reputation goes bad very quickly.
Oh my
and
God,
how that
it's
might
almost
destroy
like Jane
somebody's
Austen.
life. Yeah.
Come on.
Yes. Well,
It
it's
really is.
yes,
It's
it
almost
really
like
can.
persuasion.
Yeah, persuasion, or the Bingley sisters
Yeah.
suddenly. Yeah, exactly. Well, it's that sort of thing where, suddenly, and in this case, I don't think I'm revealing too much to say it's not necessarily the protagonist's fault, but their life as they knew it is over. Right?
I used to think, or I for a while thought that in our confessional age that shame as the driver for something had gone away. But then if you read a lot of these books with high school kids and so forth, you find out that shame is a way more powerful and much more potent with social media
Yes.
than
Kids
it
today
was.
have it even tougher.
Terrible. I
Yeah.
wouldn't want to go to high school today. I think it'd be terrible to be a teenager and subject. I mean, I made a decision a while ago, just in terms of time, not to do social media. I mean, we have employees that, staff here who are really good at it, like Susan and Miles and whatever. So I don't do. And of course, every once in a while, it comes to bite me because I don't know how to get on our Facebook page and I have no idea how to tweet. I don't really care, but still, it would be useful upon occasion. And I'm sure that I don't spend as much time with my younger relatives as I might if I were on Facebook and all, but we all make our choices. Anyway,
Yeah.
you can't shame me unless you talk to me. And that's not happening. Which is a really smart move, right? But still, I didn't think that kids are capable of that. This is the reason I brought that up. I didn't think a high school kid could do that. I think that, social pressure, curiosity, that whole thing about high school where you've got to run with the crowd and all, I don't think that you could make a decision to drop off the social media grid.
It would be very difficult, I think, to be a teenager and just decide to opt out, because that's where the conversation is happening with
Right.
a lot of your friends.
You would be so uncool.
Things like that, right? So uncool, and even schools and extracurricular activities like athletics and things like that. They're running them not necessarily through social media, but they're running them online, right? Schools have Facebook pages, right?
Yeah.
You have to be present for some of that. You can't completely turn off.
Actually, increasingly in life, you have to at least be able to log in and do stuff online. I mean, you can hardly buy a ticket or make a restaurant reservation or fly on an airplane or anything anymore if you don't, if you don't have some basic skill. So for, many seniors, it's a learning curve.
Yes.
But you don't have to do social media in order to achieve those kinds of things.
And it's on my mind a lot because we have a daughter who's sort of aging into that now, and is very tech savvy. And so as she gets to the age where we start thinking about what social media she will be allowed to participate in, that's very much on my mind.
So, as the lawyer in the room, tell me, oh great one, are there potential cases that, are arising from social media that are creative and challenging for law?
Law is always behind the 8 ball on
It is
all
always
of these
behind.
things. And so, it's like anything else. Society progresses and law's behind trying to catch up. And we're seeing that in every aspect of social media, of socialization generally, just the way we live. We see this all the time. I can remember telling clients years ago, I don't care if it's not illegal, stop treating people who are bisexual or gay or trans differently because it's going to be illegal. It's going to be. It just hasn't, we haven't caught up yet.
Yeah.
And the same with, gay marriage. The law just took a long time to catch up with the social norms. And that's what's happening with all of this too. How do we punish kids who are destroying reputations? That's a really hard thing.
I was thinking about the bullying thing, but I was also thinking that, slander and libel used to be pretty easily defined. It was mostly just print or speech.
Right.
But now, with social media and also with stuff like Snapchat and all, where it disappears before you can ever really get your hands on it, then what do you do?
And people are, especially in the kids, I sympathize with you having a child going into the social media age because, kids are killing themselves over what's been put about them on social media.
Oh, they absolutely are. I know. I mean, it's all this law of unintended consequences. The internet was a great, it facilitates all sorts of things, but also the unintended consequences of its use are are phenomenal.
Right.
And, and here we are in the middle of, I mean, every day when I read the paper, which I'm increasingly reluctant to do, worldwide, it seems to me that unintended consequences are just echoing all over. I was reading today that China is now arming its border with North Korea, while North Korea, they're now discovering, has much more delivery potential and so forth. And it reminds me of the Cold War, when we lived in this kind of constant state, for any of you old enough, probably only me, in the room to remember what it was like in the 50s, when there was some real fear that, a bomb was going to appear over our shoulder. There was this kind of constant anxiety. And I feel like that's come back at the moment. So,
Yes.
Yeah,
and it's even
without
more
Korea.
dispersed, right?
Yes, even without North Korea, true enough.
It's not just the one enemy who might do it, or the two enemies who might do it. It's that threat of who has that ability now. Well,
but it's the unintended consequence part that's really scary. Sort of like actually World War I did that. There was an assassination, and then there were all these treaties, and then
all these treaties, yeah.
Exactly. So here we all are, and it's great to read. It's great to read a thriller like yours, where despite all that, somebody plows along, and you already know there's book 4, so he obviously wins through.
Right.
And
well,
it's a comforting message.
Ven is you occasionally. People use the word anti-hero, but I really don't think that he is an anti-hero.
No,
I think he is a hero. He was raised to be on the wrong side of things, and he's learned to overcome that. But that doesn't mean he doesn't slip, and it doesn't mean he's not willing to use extra legal methods frequently if they are useful.
But he's driving towards a quote right result.
Yes.
An anti-hero is
Right.
definitely not. The anti-hero's the Joker.
Right.
Doesn't want that, actually looks for chaos and whatever. So it's been great. Does anyone have a question they'd like to ask?
Please, yes.
You mentioned doing research. How do you coordinate the writing and the research? Everybody's got a different way of doing it.
Absolutely. Some of it, if I have an idea that hinges on research, right, for the book, and I say, is it possible to do this because I've got a significant plot point that hinges on being able to do that? That research I'll usually do first before I'm really starting the book, or when I'm in the first draft. But most of it, I write the book first, and then I research to figure out what needs to be done. And sometimes that research comes out, then I can do it as I'm progressing, and I can adjust in rewrites if need be. But I try to write without getting mired in that particular area, because it is quicksand-like. You can go down in a hurry.
I get lost and distracted by the internet.
Yes.
It's very. There's been authors that have come here and they purposely use word processing that is not connected to the internet.
I often turn Wi-Fi off. I'll play the albums I have downloaded already on iTunes or whatever, so I don't need Pandora or anything like that. I just turn Wi-Fi off, keep it off for the hours that I'm working on it, and then I can turn it back on later on, because it's just too easy. You go, oh, what's that? What's the name of that Colt, or how many rounds does that hold? 2 hours later, right? It just happens too quickly.
Do you make a little notation? If
You could just put brackets in. I read a lot of manuscripts where there'll be a bracket and it'll say look up or check this, or maybe it's a different gun, or you can all go back. If you drive through it to get your story down, then you can always go back and look for that stuff. And I think the advantage to it is what you suggest, that you don't let too much research into your story, because
it sort of gets back to Patrick's question about pace too, right? It keeps me from getting too mired in the research of the story. What I usually do is I will write the scene with an assumption, assuming an answer,
right?
And then I have a handwritten list on the side that goes, look up this. Right.
Well, and the danger, of course, for you as a writer was just since your ice cream's melting and cascaded
I can just
over
see
his
myself
bowl.
flipping that over.
Actually, Ace Atkins did that on Sunday. He had a glass of champagne and it went everywhere. Oh well.
Hit the ceiling fan.
Yes. Well, no. Now I've lost my train of thought because I'm
Research
older
on
now.
research brackets on the side, or
Yeah. What was that? I don't know. I don't remember. Anybody else have a question? It'll come back to me, maybe. I didn't
So
really
do you
forget it.
plot your books out graphically somehow, like this is going to happen and this is going to happen?
I have done that. With 3 books in, I still feel like a rookie when it comes to process, honestly. My first book was plotted a lot just because I rewrote it so many times, as you often do with the first book. Second book, I had more significant milestones as long as I got to those milestones. In my third book, Every Day Above Ground, the first draft proceeded quite organically. I had some certain set pieces that I wanted to get to and emphasize along the way. Now with the standalone, I am having to go back and outline and plot it out, and I think I err on the side of plotting more than pantsing. Honestly, the seat of the pants for those of you who may not know that term, but I think I'm just more comfortable if I've plotted out at least the high points of what a chapter needs to do, and then I get to improvise around that.
Good point. I've now remembered what I was going to say, which is if you make assumptions, it could be that your assumption will prove false, and that will force you, the writer, to have to junk that and start over again.
Right.
So it may make more work in that sense. But now, Paige, I thought your hand went up.
I was curious because you said this book sort of followed a book where a lot of things had happened. Can you read these books out of order, or is it best to read them in order?
You can read them out of order.
Okay.
You can, I think most series, especially these days, are designed so that you can pick up any book in the series. It'll give you sort of a brief recap of recent events that you need to know about. But in truth, there's not much you need to know going into this book,
Okay.
except that he's rebuilding the family home.
Okay.
You know, that's pretty much it. It doesn't get into too much more detail other than that.
If you kill off characters, or if there's a romance driving it, then it really will screw that up if you come in late. You know, like the late Elizabeth Peters, her new book just came out today, actually, called The Painted Queen, finished by her friend Joan Hess. And if you didn't read Crocodile and the Sandbank first, you'd never be able to read it with any sense of suspense, because you would know at least how part of it came out in every other book, you know. So it's a different question. The plot, the story can be separate and unique book to book, but if you have ongoing relationships sometimes coming in, but his are okay, and besides it's only book 3. So you have time. It's much harder when you find him at book 13.
That is very true.
Yeah. And I've heard some authors talk about that around book 8 or 9, they stop worrying too much about backstory, and they're writing it almost like you would write a standalone, right?
We were having a hilarious discussion with Ace Atkins on Sunday. He's writing a contemporary Spencer. Spencer has to be like 105. He was a Korean War veteran, you know, and now we all just kind of assume that his military service was, maybe it was Desert Storm, maybe it was Afghanistan, you know, but everybody's complicit in it.
Yes.
And that was a condition of him writing the Spencers. He wanted to take them back. He thought it'd be interesting, and the condition was they had to stay modern. So everybody has agreed, you know, that we'll just ignore ignore all that.
That's right. The leather trench coats he seemed fond of in the 70s. We've just forgotten all of that. We'll just ignore that. So,
yes, and we're on a multi-generational dog.
Exactly.
Which is wonderful.
Kind of classy.
Right, no, it's really fun. Well, I want to thank you all for coming to join us, and I want to tell you what, this butter pecan ice cream is so good. I'm having some more. We'll throw out your melted puddle there and give you another one.
Yeah.
Right. So many thanks for joining us, and Glen, I'm delighted we got a chance to see you again and to launch this book, and I hope the rest of your book tour is enormous fun.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Barbara, and thank you for hosting me on launch day, too, with butter pecan.
Well, as I said, better on a hot day than champagne, right? So there we are. All right.
All right. Thank you.